Welcome, Aggie Nation, to the Aggie Athletics Charles White State Farm Coaches Show. My name is Shawn Joy, and we are joined today with head football coach Cory Miller. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. We're a few days away from game day, so the nerves are starting to kick in. You're trying to get all the last minute things for travel put together, so I'm ready to just kick off and see what we got.
Well, it's game week. We're excited for you guys to get started. We'll get to your week one matchup here in a little bit. Let's rewind a little bit. Let's talk about your fall camp. When did the guys get here, and what did fall camp look for you guys?
So fall camp was pretty good for us. We got everybody here on August 1st. We had some good group of guys that were here working out and running in July, so that was nice to have a large amount of our freshmen and some of our returners on campus a little bit before the official start date, just getting in the shape. And so that helped us, speed things up, especially from a conditioning standpoint of being able to practice. We didn't have really too many injury issues or guys missing practice because of pulled muscles and things like that. So that was huge. But August 4th was when we kind of kicked off the first practice. And so we've been going strong here for a little bit over 3 weeks. Had a scrimmage against Southwestern Kansas about on August 16th, about the midway point. So it was good to go out and just see some guys run around.
See a different uniform.
Yeah, see a different uniform. It was good that our first 2 games were on the road, so it was good to get on a bus and go travel somewhere and go through that experience, especially with obviously a lot of freshmen on our roster. So it's been pretty good. I mean, both sides of the ball have done some really good things. When you practice against each other, it's obviously I feel good about the competition that's going out there, but you never really know until you line up and play somebody.
Let's talk a little bit about the scrimmage you had with Southwest. What were some big things that you took away from that scrimmage?
Well, the big kind of thing that Southwestern, that I think they came out in the polls yesterday, are ranked 14th in the NEI preseason. A lot of that's based last year for what they did, and they won a game in the playoffs. And I was really, really pleased with our offense. Obviously, you don't want to put too much stock in the scrimmage because obviously you're not scheming anybody up, you're not practicing. They threw their defense, but at the same time we threw our offense out there, and we were missing a few guys that weren't cleared through clearinghouse, so it wasn't 100%, everybody on there. But we went down the field, twice in a row with our one offense that scored, and so we're with new people at some positions, and it was good to see that this early and there's some continuity and some things going on versus a very, very good football team defensively. I thought we did some good things in the box that we have to improve on if we're going to make that jump, in the win total and up the Sooner Athletic Conference standing. So there was a lot of good things I think that came from that scrimmage, just an opportunity to line up against a quality, well-coached, well-run program, and just kind of, and then also getting all these new guys out there, their first, real kind of, I wouldn't say real because there's no real scoreboard, but game-like experience. And I think there's something that's important in that because we're going to have some young guys, contributing at some point, on offense and defense and a lot on special teams.
So based off camp and that scrimmage, what do you think so far with this year's club are going to be some of the strengths that this year's team has?
So I really like our offensive skill positions. This is probably the deepest we've been at wide receiver. We really feel good with about 6 of our wide receivers. Which is nice to be able to go roughly 2 deep with it. We returned, our tight end position with Will Rodriguez and Jabari Coleman, and then we've added a really talented group of freshmen that will be able to pick up the pace here in about a year or 2. And so I really like our tight end room. We got some that are a little bit better at catching the ball. We got some are a little bit better at blocking. So there's a nice little combination with those guys. The O-line, I think, has come along really well. That's interior wise, we got the good returners, but on the outside, we got a couple of young guys that that played a little bit last year, started our last 2 or 3 games for us at tackle, and then we're breaking in a new offensive tackle this year. So it was good to see them work together, be a little bit better in pass pro for here. And then we've had, we got 2 quarterbacks right now still kind of battling out with Cash and Chance, and there's a good chance we'll probably, both of them are going to see action this year. And so, it's good to see them kind of, they're 2 different quarterbacks. And so, they bring 2 different things to the table, and then both of them have kind of risen to the occasion and played really well all fall camp. And then, on the D-line wise, we return a lot of playing experience with Wally and Elsie and Hector and Aaron Benson as well there. So we really like kind of where we're at with our top end of the defensive line. And at the linebacker room, we got some really talented outside backers That would just get better over the season. Inside, we've had a lot of guys step up with Zayden Hughes returning, who started 10 games for us. And then the back end's been pretty good for us. CJ Holmes is going on a 3-year starter. Lowe's going on a 3-year starter. So, we feel really good about that.
On the flip side, what are some things that you look at so far that could be perceived as weaknesses that you guys need to get better at?
Well, the big thing is obviously going to be the quarterback position. We graduated a 4-year starter at quarterback. And so it's one of those things where, both those guys don't, Cash got a little bit of, playing time last year when Brandon got knocked out in the first half against Texas College. And he kind of had a little bit at some end of game things, but nothing, quite like what, Brandon's had over the 4 years. And so, with quarterback, the ultimate measure of quarterback play is how they play in a game. And so that's something we're not going to really get a real good idea on until we kick off. And so that's obviously going to be a big question mark for us. Graduate our punter. Punting will be we got 2 guys battling out between Lawrence Need, who's our 3-year start safety, and then we got a freshman punter, Matthew Lark from Perry, who's going to be a really, really good one here down the road. Once he kind of works out some technical stuff. And so we got to figure out that position to that area. And then on the defense, it's going to be about, we got some young guys that are in the 2 deep. Defensively, we got to play a few more guys. It's going to be really about how fast can some of those guys grow up. We got 2 corners that are freshmen that have really good fall camp with their freshmen. We got a really good freshman linebacker and a couple outside linebackers that are young, and then a couple young D linemen that are kind of coming up the mix. And they're probably not going to factor in, week 1, maybe week 2, but we're going to need them come week by week 4, week 5, week 6. And so I think some of how well we do, especially down the meat of our schedule, will be how some of these younger guys, I told them, they don't get the luxury of waiting. They're 18 years old and they got to turn 2021 here in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So
Happy birthday.
Yeah, they got to speed it up for us. So some of it's going to be kind of, how fast can they come along to add that depth that we're going to need as we get into the stretch of conference play.
You talked a little bit about Brandon.
Yep.
Nowadays in college athletics and college football, having a 4-year starter at quarterback can be rare, no matter what level you're at. Talk about what he meant to this program, and then what's it going to take to replace a guy like him that was your quarterback for 4 years.
Obviously Brandon's been huge. Obviously he stuck with us through the coaching transition. He played 2 years for Coach Mojo and then kind of stuck around and played 2 years for us. The biggest thing is, for what we've always been trying to do is reach towards consistency, and having somebody at that spot who, day in and day out performed and did some things, kind of set kind of a nice benchmark for others to kind of go achieve. Obviously, he, statistically and stuff was absolutely, outstanding throughout his career and did, some amazing things for us. So, he's kind of, showed us, hey, if people stay and they stick with it and they buy into the process of it, good things can happen to them. And so, that's been a big thing that, his, legacy and what he left here. But, it's college athletics and, it's someone else's turn, and that's the fun part of college athletics is, every couple of years someone else gets their turn. And with that, there's always, kind of the uncertainty and the nervousness, but then there's also excitement, that comes with that, somebody new taking the reins.
I know you probably don't want to get into too much detail on this, but Brandon's playing style compared to the 2 guys that are battling it out right now, how much of that is going to be different with the style of play on the offense that you guys are looking for?
Obviously, we got to change a little bit to the skill set of what we do. Brandon was, it's hard to find a better, I'd say NEI athlete than Brandon. He's such a strong kid, 200 pounds, great runner. You're not going to be able to replicate that. But both of the quarterbacks we got now got big arms. They can throw the ball down the field, and Chance is very mobile. He's probably not as fast as Brandon, but he's as big and physical as Brandon is. So he adds a different element that comes into it. So you're not going to change. With so many guys returning on there, you're not going to necessarily hey, here's a new car right here, but you got to look at, all right, hey, this is some stuff we did with Brandon, and now we look at Cash and Chance. There's some things that, we can't do with him, but there's now some things that we haven't been able to do that Brandon didn't like to do that these guys can do. So you just got to kind of adjust a little bit to what the each player's strengths was.
Gotcha. Let's look at your guys' roster. Kind of break it down for us. Is it a mix of returners, newbies, and also high school transfer? What is the roster at OPSU look like this year?
So the big thing for us is we have 20. I think if I counted right, there's a couple guys that maybe can do another year. Now we'll see where they get with towards graduation at the end of the year. But we got 20 guys right now are classifying as seniors. So last couple of years we've been like somewhere between 10 and 12. So I think in small college athletics, anytime your senior class, at least in football, is in the 20s or around the 20s, that's a really good thing. And so that's a big thing for us is, guys have been in the program for 3, 4, a couple of them 5 years now. So a lot of, experience, a lot of familiarity with the conference. There's so many things that we don't have to teach right now to some of those other guys. They know how to travel. They know how to practice. They know what a meeting looks like. They know what's coming. Whereas a freshman, they don't know what's going on. And the nice thing here is we have about, I think 55, 56 guys from last year's team back, where the previous year we only had like 36 or 35 guys. So we've almost doubled the amount of returners that came in with the roster. And then there's always every year we got about 50 to 55 freshmen sprinkled in with about 8 or 9 transfers that go in there. So the thing that hurts us a little bit is, anytime there's like a change in leadership, a lot of times you have, especially in today's age, they're transferring, there's attrition. We only have 8 juniors that were kind of with the program. There's some that kind of transferred in. I'll bump that up a little bit. That are classified juniors. So there's that missing class right there. That's the depth issue that you kind of run into. Whereas if that was a little bit closer, say there's another 20 right here, we're looking at 40 upperclassmen, which at the NEI level is really, really good. So that's kind of been the bottleneck as we're trying to kind of push that out. We got a really strong sophomore class, big redshirt freshman class. Some of those guys are going to be playing a lot for us this year, and another big freshman class. So we're starting to really push the numbers and get it where it's supposed to be. But we have that nice senior class this year.
Nice, good deal. So your first 2 years here, 5-5,
Yep.
showed improvement both years, and looking forward to a good season now. What are the biggest thing it's going to take for you guys to take that next step and go from 5-5 and up the rankings in the SAC?
We got to close games out. You look at it, Langston, obviously 31-14 at half, lost the game 35-14. Texas College, came down the last play of the game. We couldn't score. We got to be able to win close games. I think we were 1-3 in one-score games. And so, that's the thing, that's the maturity, that's the experience, being able to overcome. Probably one of the things that we got to clean up on both sides of the ball is pre and post snap penalties. We had a huge issue with holding last year, hurt us in a lot of critical situations offensively. And then defensively, some of the post snap and then even the pre snap would jump in early. There's a 4th down against Texas College. We jump in and give them an automatic first down. And so in those games, those little things right here, the mental, the discipline are something that we got to work on. Offensively, we got to finish drives. We've done a really good job of moving the football. If you look at our yards per play and stuff like that, we put points on the board. But when you look at some of the other statistics that kind of come with it, we haven't probably put as many points on the board as we probably should have. When you look at kind of what we've been averaging statistically from a yards per play standpoint, some of that comes into those penalties, killing drives, getting down the red zone, kind of faltering at times. That's been a big issue for us. And then defensively, it comes down to tackling. And for us, if we're going to make a major improvement, we have to tackle better. And we got to limit the explosives. We averaged, I think, giving up 13 explosive plays a game last year. And so we've got to be able to consistently play better all around defense. It's not one individual person, it's the collective of the group. And then obviously special teams, we got to be a little bit better in our kick coverage, and then we got to be able to get a few more points, on the board via field goals and stuff, and kick a little bit deeper than we have in the past. And so some of those things, I think if we can, turn on that, now those one-score games flip into your favor, and you've got a good opportunity to come away with a couple more wins or put yourself in a situation where you're playing for something at the end of the year. So, collectively, we've done a good job offensively taking care of the ball, and then on the defensive side, getting turnovers. We got to continue to do that. If we can keep that up, it's going to give us a good chance here. But I think for us, it's about finishing drives and tackling on defense.
We all know how good the SAC is, whether it's baseball, volleyball, football, every sport. The Sooner Athletic Conference is very competitive at a national level. Talk about the Sooner this year and how you guys think you stack up in the league this year.
So, for us, I think it's going to be a real interesting year in the Sooner. You got your kind of the two heavyweights. You got Tex West, who is preseason number 10. You got Iowa's preseason number 18. So we got two teams in our conference that are ranked in the top 20. So obviously two very good programs that both went to the playoffs. This first year, the Sooner actually got two teams in the playoffs, and that may not seem like anything like kind of crazy, but we're not a two-division league, so we only get one auto. So we got an at-large. So with NEI, only 7 at-larges make the playoffs. So, we were able to get a team in out of our conference picked as an at-large, where there's two teams from a conference, but they have two divisions. So each division winner goes. And so those programs are, they're the kind of the standard right now. That's who everybody's chasing. And if you go through from about 3 to 8, like it's anybody's ball game. Everybody last year beat each other, but at least, I haven't looked at everybody's roster coming back, but I know there's a lot of teams replacing quarterbacks this year. I think that's going to be a big thing. Wayland's quarterback graduated. I believe Langston's is gone. The two that are at the top are returning their quarterbacks, Ottawa and Tex West. I think LCU has a new quarterback. Texas College has a new quarterback. We're going to have a new quarterback. So, I think a lot of what's going to happen in the league and where the people go is how well does the quarterback play go for some of those teams. But, in our league, it's, you got to be able to travel. There's some distance in there, be able to handle that. I think it's tough some teams to come our way. It's also tough for us to head that way. And so there is some home field advantage, for us when we're at home, and obviously for the other teams when we have to go travel to them. But we do got our two closer games, between Langston and Wayland on the road, so that's not as bad as. But we got to travel all the way to East Texas or Louisiana or Phoenix. That's a trip.
For sure. Speaking of trips, this is game week. You guys open up this Saturday in Nebraska at Peru State.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about them as an opponent. And, what are you looking for out of the boys when you guys head up there this weekend?
So this is a big game for our program. Obviously, it's a non-conference still. And so sometimes you try to, obviously conference play is, what you build everything around. But I finally feel like we're at the point when we scheduled this game is, hey, we need to go and we need to play a team out of some of these conferences. I think that's our league's doing a good job of starting to do that, that are, kind of teams that are on the verge of being ranked. Peru State's coming in with some big expectations. They won 7 games last year. They're picked second in their division in the heart behind Grandview, who's the defending national champion. And so it's a great facility up there. And I think it's an opportunity for us to go and showcase ourselves, against a pretty good program historically in Peru State. And for us, it's like, hey, some of them are talking to them as being a fringe, playoff team. And it's one of the reasons we go, travel in the Southwestern, the scrimmage them, is if we want to get our program there, we have to go and we have to play against those guys and see where we stand and understand, hey, this is what it takes to get to that level and see if we are at that level. And I think for us to get in the conference play, I think it's good to go test yourself early against those type of teams here, because it can do so much for you if we get a win. And then also at the same time too, it lets us know, hey, here's our strengths, here's our weaknesses, versus like if you kind of pay a team or, play down, you don't necessarily get some of the things that, may be an issue for you that you want to have shored up by the time you get to conference. So, I mean, we put two, very, very quality, non-conference foes on our schedule between East Texas Baptist and Peru State to get, because we got to open up with Ottawa. So we get, who knows what they'll be ranked at that time, but the number 18 playoff team coming home there. So, our first 3 games of the year are gauntlet. I think there's 21 or 22 wins between those 3 teams and there. And then after that, it gets very much more favorable for us. And so I'm hoping that making us battle tested will put us in a good position in the SAC race.
Well, awesome, Coach. Well, we're looking forward to you guys open up this weekend. We want to wish you guys the best of luck and go up there and get us an Aggie victory, okay?
Appreciate it. Thanks, John.
All right, guys, that does it for our latest edition of the Charles White State Farm Coaches Show. We'll see you next time.